What's going on, guys? Welcome to quiz number 7. This is the series where all of you analyze the same 3 positions and then we talk about the results in this video. As always, there are links in the description below. You can click on those and go to the quizzes. I'm also going to put a link to the playlist for all the previous quiz videos. So if you are just watching this for the first time and you'd like to go back and see all the previous quizzes, you can click on that and it'll take you right to the playlist. So having said that, let's jump right in. All right, so before we jump into the positions, here's the rating distribution graph. We had 1,611 players this week, and we actually had the most amount of players in the 0 to 1,000 category, which I think is the first time that's happened. So if you're interested, check that out. But now let's go over to the positions. All right, here's position number 1. If you'd like to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that now. For everyone else who's ready to see the solutions, here we go. All right, so 0 to 1,000, the top move was bishop takes h7 check. Number 2 was queen h5, and number 3 was queen to e2. 1,000 to 1,300 actually had the same top 3 moves, although the percentage was a little bit higher on bishop takes h7. 13 to 1,600 I only saw 2 moves. We had bishop takes h7 check, and then queen h5. 16 to 2,000 we had again bishop takes h7 check. A few people saying queen h5, and I think maybe one person said queen to e2. 2,000 and above, again, bishop takes h7 check was the top move, and then a couple people said queen to h5 as well. All right, so first of all, this is an interesting position because white has quite a nice attack going. The queen can come here, as some of you mentioned. The bishop's already ready to capture, the knight's helping out. But at the same time, black has quite a bit of counterplay going on here as well. The queen is here, the knight, the bishop. So you have to be careful with how you approach this. So let's talk about queen h5, because queen h5 is a very natural looking move. You know, a lot of times if you're trying to go for checkmate over here, you line up the bishop and you bring the queen over and you go for checkmate. So I want to talk about why this actually wasn't a good move in this position. So queen h5, it's a good move because it's creating a very strong threat, right? This is checkmate, next move. The problem with the move is that it doesn't put black in check, which means black has any move on the board at their disposal to play. And so if you check out bishop takes g2 check, forces our king to go over. And now black can play knight takes f1, again check, because now they have the discovered check with the queen. And so what are we forced to do? Well, the king can't go here, can't go here, it can't go in the corner. Only move legal is king takes g2. And then the knight can go back to e3 check. This is a little bit of a tricky line to see. We have to move our king somewhere, let's say king h1. And now black, having taken a bunch of our pieces, right, we lost a pawn and a rook, now black can say, all right, now I'll deal with this checkmate threat. And they simply play h6. And even though we have all these pieces over here, there's no way to really break through, right? We have to get our queen there somehow. I mean, we can play bishop h7 check, but the king just slides over. It doesn't really do anything. And there's not really anything else to do. We can't bring our queen in to go for checkmate, obviously, because it gets captured. So that was the problem with queen h5. Even though normally it's a pretty good move, in this case, because black had the counterattack that was going to be with check, right? All those moves, bishop takes, and then knight takes, and then knight back, were all with check. So this is an important learning opportunity. When you're in a very tactical position where both sides have threats, a lot of times you don't have time to play moves that aren't check. So this was a perfect example. In this position, it's a very sharp position. Even though it's a good move, in this case, we just don't have time, right? We can't allow black to put us in check, take a bunch of our pieces without doing something. That is why, if we go back to the top move that a lot of people did find, that is why bishop takes h7 check is so much better. We're starting off with the check, first of all, so black doesn't even have the option to do this. Has to move the king over. And now we play queen h5, and you might say, well, now we're giving black the opportunity to put us in check. And you're right, we are. But there's another important difference about bishop takes h7 check and queen h5. And the difference is that there is no longer a pawn that can move to h6, right? So for example, if black does the same thing, let's say check, we go here, takes our rook like we saw before, we take it, goes back, check, we move our king, let's say, actually Stockfish likes king h3 because it stops black from putting us in check again. Now black's just getting mated. There's no way to stop the checkmate. We're going to move this bishop and we're gonna checkmate. So knight to g4 is the best move, but then we just take the knight, and then eventually after we get the check from the queen, it's mate. So that was the really big difference. Like, not only was it check, an even more important feature about this move was that it basically prevented black from defending the only way that black could really defend. So the only way black could stop queen h5 and mate here was with h6. By taking the pawn with check and then going there, there's no way to stop this anymore. Black's just in trouble. So bishop takes g2, king g1, knight to g4 check. Actually, Stockfish says black can survive by bringing the knight back to h6. But this is still a really good position for white. We play bishop to d3, and I mean white's way ahead here. So technically black can survive, but this was the idea behind that position. So all right, so going back to the original position, one thing I want to point out here that's also really good to learn is when you're trying to attack and you're considering, all right, should I play queen h5? Should I take? Should I do something else? One of the big questions that you always want to ask yourself is, what is my opponent going to do to prevent me from executing my plan? So if I say, all right, I want to play queen h5 and I want to go for checkmate, you have to ask yourself, well, what is my opponent going to do to stop that? And I would start by saying, can they just defend the pawn? Well, not really. Okay, so the other option would be, can they block off any of my pieces? And you might consider at this point, well, yeah, h6 is a move. How am I going to break through after h6 is played? And if you see that, well, there's not really an easy way, that is how you would come up with the idea of maybe I should take first and then play queen h5, because now I'm still threatening to do this, which is going to lead to checkmate, and black doesn't have a good way to stop it. That's the kind of the thought process that I would go about at arriving at that move. Queen e2, you know, you're saving your queen, you're trying to defend, but doesn't really defend because these are low-valued pieces, knights and a bishop, and you're defending it with high-valued pieces, like a queen. And so even if black takes this, you're not going to be able to take this unless you're willing to give up your queen. So queen e2 doesn't really do much for you. You still have to play here, and then, you know, black's still going to take your pieces and go back to e3. So that's the problem with queen to e2. But for those of you who did find bishop takes h7 check, congratulations. And if we check Stockfish, it does just show that the top 3 moves are what you guys mentioned, but you can see that only one of them, only bishop takes h7 check, actually has a good evaluation for white, and the rest black's going to be winning. All right, here's position number 2. If you'd like to pause the video and figure out what you would play for white, go ahead and do that. If you're ready to see the solutions, here we go. All right, so from 0 to 1,000, we had the top move being h takes g4. Second move was bishop takes e5, and third move was f4. 1,000 to 1,300 also had h takes g4 as the top move, but then the second move was f4, and the third move was bishop takes e5. 13 to 1,600, again, h takes g4, second move f4, and third move was knight to g3. 1,600 to 2,000 actually had the same move, so h takes g4, f4, and knight g3. And then 2,000 and above also had h takes g4, f4, and also knight g3. So for those of you who remember quiz number 1 in this series, this is kind of a similar position where there's sort of a checkmate threat going on h2. Like after this knight moves somewhere, for example, knight f3 check is a threat for black. We capture it, and then the queen would come down here, and that's checkmate because the knight defends it. So very similar position, but it's a little bit different. It's not quite the same. And so, you know, there's a couple of things to consider when you're looking at this position. And the most obvious move that you want to ask yourself is, well, can I just take the knight, right? Because the knight is kind of the big problem with this checkmate threat. So by capturing it, I'm sort of eliminating that problem. Now, the thing that you wanted to make sure that you calculated was what's going to happen after black recaptures, because there's actually 2 ways. First of all, capturing with the h-pawn opens up the rook, and you still have the same problem. So you would have to have come up with a follow-up solution. If you didn't, well, then maybe you got lucky by saying h takes g4, but you definitely have to figure out how do you stop, because you still have the same exact problem. Knight to f3, after you capture, the queen comes in, checkmate. And the follow-up move was knight to g3, because you're blocking off the queen. So you essentially got a piece, and you also prevented the checkmate, and you're kind of defending the square if black ever tried to do something there as well. So knight g3, very nice defensive move, and you're probably going to threaten to take here and then bring the queen over, and you'll probably be okay. So that was kind of the idea on h takes g4. Now, the other thing black could have done was capture with the knight, and again, unleash the same attack. And now here you actually have a couple options. You could play f4 just to block the queen off. You could play knight g3 to block the queen off. Either way is fine. And so the point was, yes, you can get away, with capturing the knight in this position, as long as you calculated through how you were going to survive after that happened. So for those of you who said h takes g4, you are correct. That was the best move. Now let's go talk about some of the other moves. F4 is a very nice move as well, because you're immediately taking care of this queen on the dag, right? You're just like, let's just stop that right away. And you're also attacking both knights. Now, Stockfish doesn't like this quite as much. And the reason is because when you play f4, you actually allow black a nice little tactic, knight to e3, and it creates this fork on the queen and the rook, and you don't want to take it because your queen would be taken by the rook. And so after you do something like move your queen, then black has the ability to capture, and you can take here, queen moves, kind of gets into this line where you do get the 2 knights for the rook, which is good. Okay, having 2 pieces is better than a rook, but it's not as good as just getting a free piece, which if we go back, when you just captured on g4 right away, that was just the best way to do it. So really what this position came down to was this was the best as long as you saw ways to prevent the checkmate. If you didn't see how to prevent the checkmate going forward, then you probably weren't going to take it, and then f4 was not a bad move, but it wasn't as good. Now the other move that a lot of people said was knight to g3. Now knight to g3, yes, you are blocking off the queen, so you are stopping the checkmate there, which is good. The problem is you're not taking a piece, and so black has kind of the option, what do they want to do? And Stockfish actually likes the move h4, and now you have a problem. You don't want to move this, or you're getting mated like we talked about, so you have to kind of just trade knights here. But then you end up with this really awkward triple isolated pawns, isolated pawn. This is open for black. I mean, there's nothing immediately for black, but this is a tough position to play for white. So that's why knight g3 kind of doesn't turn out the best. And then the other move that I think people said was bishop takes e5, which maybe if you thought, okay, rook takes d1 and I'll take the queen, that would work. The problem is black doesn't have to do that. Black can just take with the queen. And now you have 2 problems to deal with, and you can't really deal with both of them at the same time. You've got to deal with your queen. You've got to deal with checkmate. You can't do it. And if you play something like f4, there's just queen takes e4, and you still have lots of problems. Queen is still under attack. Knight can come in next move. You have to be careful that this doesn't get captured. It's really great for black. So that's why bishop takes e5 doesn't quite work. So if you saw h takes g4, congratulations, that was the correct move. And if we check Stockfish, you'll see option number 1, option number 1, option number 2, and option number 3. But by far the best one was capturing on g4. All right, here's position number 3. If you'd like to pause the video and figure out what you would play for black, and also, more importantly, what general plan would you take up with black and why? Here are the choices on the quiz. You can look at those and see which one you think is the correct answer. And when you're ready, we'll take a look at the solutions. All right, so 0 to 1,000, the most common answer was to trade pieces to simplify. The next was to sacrifice pieces to get checkmate, and the third was run the king over to the h file. 1,000 to 1,300 was the exact same 3 things. 13 to 1,600 said also the same things. 1,600 to 2,000 said try to trade pieces, and then number 2 was run the king to the h file, and number 3 was sacrifice pieces. And then 2,000 and above also was the same. Try to trade to simplify, run the king to the h file, and then sacrifice pieces to achieve checkmate. So, when you look at a position like this, the first question you want to ask yourself is, what's the material like? So there's a queen, there's a queen, there's a rook, there's a rook, there's a knight, and we have this bishop and this rook. So black is ahead material, is ahead the exchange, rook for a bishop. So that's good. And so that should kind of immediately make you think about, well, maybe trading is the right answer because I'm ahead material. So if we trade everything off to the endgame, I'm going to have an advantage. That's one thing. The other thing is if you ask yourself the question, okay, where can this queen move to? You can't move there, you can't move there, you can't move there, you can't move there. You can't move your queen anywhere, it just gets captured. So even though it's not being attacked and you're not necessarily going to lose it immediately, you can't do anything with it, which is not a good thing. So that is a huge reason why trying to trade pieces and simplify the position is going to be really beneficial to black, because then it's going to free up your queen. For example, if this knight was traded, well then it would open up the a5 square, it would open up the a1 square, the queen would have options. Or if the bishop was traded, it would open up these 2 squares, the queen would have options. You get the idea. By trading pieces, it frees up black's trapped queen. Now, also, you have to consider, like, is there a way to sacrifice pieces and get checkmate? Because if there is, that's obviously going to be the best answer no matter what. But in this case, there's not a lot of ways for black to proceed. Like we talked about, the queen can't move. The only thing that maybe black could try would be to sacrifice the rook here, bring this rook over, but then the king could probably just move somewhere, or even just actually rook c3 blocking looks pretty good. And I don't know how black is going to follow up. So that's why, you know, capturing or sacrificing pieces in this case wasn't the best answer. There just wasn't a good way to do it. The other thing that I'll talk about briefly is running the king to the h file. Now this kind of sounds like a good plan, right? Like your king is pretty much in the open. You've got a queen here, you got a rook here. Running over here, maybe trying to hide on h6 actually seems like a good plan. The problem is, let's just say king g7, for example, and we'll just go with what Stockfish says. g4, right? And guess what? You're not going to be able to hide over here for long. These pawns are going to be traded, and your king's going to be very wide open. So that's why, you know, running over here didn't really make too much sense, because you're not going to be able to stay safe anyway. So the best move and the best way to trade pieces and simplify was actually bringing this rook over here. And the reason is you're basically forcing a pretty big trade. Either white has to say, all right, let me give up my queen for the two rooks, like this, in which case you're happy as black, because now you don't have to worry about getting mated, and it's going to probably free up your queen very soon. You're going to be able to most likely chase this bishop away or trade something off. So that's good. And then the other option is if the queen moves somewhere, well, then you're going to be able to trade the rook. And an important thing about this move is that there's no good checks for white's queen. Because if there was a good check, this might not be a great move. But in this case, how is white going to check you? Can't go there, can't go there, can't go there, can't go there or there, can't take that or go there. And so all the checks are covered. And so, I mean, yeah, Stockfish says the best thing is to just trade the queen for the two rooks. But if the queen like tried to go somewhere else, like queen b4, well, now you just take, bishop can take. And let's see, queen a4. Yeah, your queen can come out. And now black is just ahead, like we talked about, ahead the exchange, and black is going to be very nice. So that was the move. And, you know, it turns out that's really the only great move for black. If you try to do something similar with this rook, the problem is you give up control of this file, also gives up control of the square. Now, like we talked about, white has check, which also is a fork on your rook, and now you're just completely losing after you like move. Well, then white's just going to take everything, and it's not going to end well for you. So only real move was this rook here, with the idea of trading to simplify the position and get your queen unstuck from the corner over there. So congratulations if you found that move, or if you said that plan of trading and simplifying with that idea, that was the correct answer. All right, now it's time for viewers versus Stockfish. We did win last week, so let's see if we can keep it up. Here's position number 1, and a lot of people actually found the right move, so really good job on this position. 68.2% of everyone found bishop takes h7 check, so that was fantastic. Let's see how we did on position number 2. All right, here's position number 2. Like we talked about earlier, h takes g4 was the best move, but f4 was also a close second. And so for this one, I counted both of these moves. If you chose either of these moves, it counted towards the percentage. And we had 45.8% matching up with Stockfish on one of these two moves. So not bad. Pulled the average down a little bit, but let's see how we did on the third position. All right, so here's position number 3. Now, actually, even though the majority of everyone did say the correct plan of try to trade pieces and simplify, a lot of people were thrown off with sacrificing pieces to try to get checkmate and moving the king to the h file. And so if we check the percentages, the total percentage was 45.2% that matched up with the correct plan of trying to trade pieces. So if we take the total average of all of those three, we end up with 53.1%. That is another victory against Stockfish. So congratulations. We are 2 for 2 out of the last 2 weeks. Although I have to warn you, I did get some feedback from a lot of people saying that they want the positions to be more difficult. So I don't know if we're going to be able to keep this up going forward, but we'll see what happens next week. But as usual, I'll pull over my spreadsheet. You can see the results. We have 2 wins the last 2 weeks. Let's see if we can keep it going. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, let me know questions, comments, feedback, anything that you think will improve this and make it better in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.